Today we are, I should get this water right here. I gotta be watering up. Today we are gonna be working on part 2 development. This is some fun stuff here that we get to go through. This is where the stuff happens. This is where we get to make decisions early on that are gonna affect the trajectory of my entire life. That's a little crazy, but perhaps true if this thing blows up. So yeah, it really matters how we structure part 2 here, because there's a lot involved, there's a lot of topics, and we want to make some type of clear, coherent narrative throughout part 2. So identifying and pursuing our goals, and we're coming out from, yo, I am sat. What does sat mean? I am standing at attention. That's what I'm guessing. Yeah. All right. So we started. I threw some primitive outline, which is kind of like this, at Gemini last week, and it started giving us stuff, and so we just now need to slowly push things together and make this work. So where are we at? We've got this prologue that we have to obviously recap pretty much what were the main. Actually, I guess recap a mission briefly. State, yes sir, nice. Restate the mission of part 2 to provide a practical science-backed toolkit for identifying meaningful goals and pursuing them effectively. Bridge from part 1, kind of reminding the reader that our freedom lies in the process of deliberate reflection, noticing the signals of our conscience. We don't have to use those words, and realigning our understanding and actions. Right, and yeah, I guess that doesn't highlight the idea that we have this understanding that we can leverage. You know, we're predisposed with this understanding. I'm the present form of sitting. Nice, yes sir. All right, well, if I'm sitting for the stream, you don't have to stand. So, please take your seats. We will want to dumb down this so that part 2 doesn't require someone to read part 1. Right, yeah, so we have to we don't have to do this now, but we're going to have to recap part 1 in the most accessible language possible, but something that carries the weight of part 1 still, because we are going to be leveraging that weight. And then we want to acknowledge that everyone's predisposition and circumstances are unique. Personality, biology, environment. Frame the following sections not as rigid rules, but as a collection of powerful tools to be experimented with. The goal is to find what works for you. Aye, aye, Captain. All right, and then we had, I have this overarching concepts and key players, and then this says the foundational toolkits, mastering the levers of agency. So we could probably fuse these. So this is going to be talking about, I guess, the context that we're dealing with, which is our brain, but we don't have to go in the crazy neuroscience way, but we have to go in the now psychology and cognitive psychology. I don't know, whatever this branch is. The idea of attention, motivation, and then what do we got? Managing your biology for okay. Yeah, I guess we could talk about those things there. So yeah, attention, motivation, and the fact that this is going to be I guess, conflicting with our automatic drives, basically. Like we have to introduce the key players, which is why I think that the way it's said in this left part is not great, and obviously the way it's said in the right side is not great either. So we'll have to figure something out for that. Yeah, but this is kind of the idea. This section covers the operating system, quote unquote, of the mind. That enable and hinder our deliberate action. That's the idea. So that's where like drives and biases and stuff can get in the way. So perhaps for now I just do that. Let's just kind of skim through this to see if there is anything I want to actually grab so that we can move on. Attention is the most fundamental resource. Where we direct it determines our reality in some sense. Tools and concepts, mindfulness as a training ground. So yeah, we could talk about mindfulness. We could talk about deep work versus shallow work. Introduce the concept of focus, uninterrupted work that creates value, contrasted with the. So I don't know if we want to go too crazy into like I think we just want to set up the key players. In this section, we only want to set up the key players. I don't know. Maybe we do want to go into like ways to combat them. So perhaps we first introduce the scope / context of the operating system, and then discuss practical tools, relevant practical tools. Maybe. It's just going to be a little disjointed though, which is a bummer. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to think through that. The engine of action, understanding and channeling motivation. Motivation isn't it's a neurochemical process. We can understand influence. Role of dopamine. So yep, we have to do the role of dopamine here. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. The progress principle. Highlight that the most powerful motivator is making meaningful progress. Yeah, we do want to actually talk about that. The embodied mind, managing your biology for optimal performance. So this type of thing, I think we should just kind of chill out on for now. Our cognitive abilities are not separated from our physical. Actually, this is really important. It's not a prerequisite for mental clarity and resilience. This is just a tool. Managing our biology is a practical way to boost mental clarity and resilience in the following ways: sleep, nutrition, exercise, stress management, etc. But there's a lot that's going to go into that, so maybe we have to be careful there. Navigating your inner world, dealing with automatic concerns and biases. Okay, there we go. Effective self-regulation involves understanding and working with these tendencies, not just fighting them. So we got recognizing cognitive biases, Emotional regulation as a skill. Oh, so this is it's making these be primary topics that we discuss up here. So that's something we could do, actually. Understanding your disposition. Wow, so this is huge, actually. This becomes a huge major section, which maybe works. Which we could do prior to the identifying what to pursue. Right? Identifying what to pursue. This is like, you know, this sounds pretty chill and not too large scope. But this is perhaps the major section where we get most philosophically deep, as we have to talk about logic and rational thought and how to, you know, make sense of a situation and how to communicate that to yourself and others, etc. Onion of the First, Stan Richton Helmeter Brigade, sir. Yes, sir. Our forces are ready to engage the hapless masses, sir. Ready to deploy the document in full force, full throttle, sir. Yes, sir. They won't know what hit him, sir. Yes, sir. All right. No deploying the document yet. Actually, I guess deploy part 1, but we can't deploy the full document. We're still in the first 45 minutes of Oppenheimer. We don't get the big bang until maybe like hour 2. Understood, sir. Yes, sir. At ease. All right. And I think I'm going to film Friday morning for the Alex O'Connor video. I've been just editing it, making sure that it's tight, making sure that it reads well. And I think this is the first attempt at, I'm not going to say at you know, a viral video, but our first attempt at marketing, like our first attempt at, like, you know, throwing this out there. I'll probably post it on at least the Alex O'Connor subreddit, if not any others, maybe the Decoding the Gurus subreddit. That would be funny. And then also I could just change the script slightly so that it's not directly after Alex O'Connor, but rather after panpsychism itself, and then just repost that on like the philosophy channel. Like I've got the script written. In theory, it's a decent argument. Be careful with subreddits. Will I get kicked off, or will people not like me? Or are we going to be fishing for some bad fish? Is that what you're saying? We're not gonna like what we find, what we pull in. I think we just need activity so that YouTube's algorithms just start helping us out here. The people on Reddit, especially in the non-academic, philosophical, historical subreddits, are truly insufferable, at least from what I've seen. Well, hopefully they come here and they see that we're trying to do something in the name of good morals and helping people out, and they'll be scared away. They'll be like, oh, not this philosophy. There's not enough hate. We need more hate. All right, with the foundational toolkit in place, this section focuses on the what. How to use reflection to identify goals that are genuinely meaningful and aligned with your values. The core idea, you can't aim for a target you can't see. The first step is to clarify your values, interests, and your current position through structured reflection. All right, I should be keeping these so that I can... Tools and concepts. We've got writing. I think creativity is like the first thing. I feel like creativity is the topic. And then thinking, you know, this would have to be writing, etc. Then we've got clarifying, core values. Is that not part of creativity, or is that No, I guess it's not. What is this? How journaling? I feel like these are just, this is out of order here. I don't think we need to be talking about journaling and structured writing exercises. Maybe we just go thinking. Ah, no, this is actually really great to talk about the self-authoring suite. What do we do? On the more academic subreddits, the people are usually chill. It's quite insane because you'd think someone more passionate about a subject is more opinionated, but they're much more nuanced. Well, hopefully that's because they understand the material better and the material tells them how humble they really should be. The less educated troglodytes, I don't know if I've ever said that word before, who scroll through as their daily activity to prove a point will say the most absurd and insufferable stuff. Yeah, no, I worry that they won't take the time to try to understand what we're trying to say. But if I communicate precisely enough, then maybe that won't matter. But it's going to matter for at least some people. That said, you know, hopefully just the fact that there's a lot to read is a good enough buffer such that only the people that do feel like there's, you know, a positive thing going on here, we can they'll feel the need to come. So, you know, maybe it works itself out, but also it might be good for me to get exposure to some toxicity when we're smaller, so that I don't make a mistake when we're huge and get exposed to toxicity. I read the headline and thus I know what this is about, person. Yep. Yeah, it's going to be really important for us to get to these logical fallacies, because I need to make sure I know them, not so that I can like invoke them, but just so I can recognize them. And I feel like we, you know, while I'm on stream, I can talk in logical fallacy speak, but obviously when I'm talking with a person, invoking logical fallacies is so, you know, it sounds a little pompous. So I could probably just say that's illogical because of this. You know, that's the thing that I ought to learn, not just how to identify it, but how to explain it in a way that doesn't require just pointing at a term and saying, that's a this. All right. Introduce exercises to help identify what truly matters to you. No, this isn't in a grand sense, not in a absolute sense, but in relation to the context of interest. Whatever you're working on, we just have to be. Yeah, you know what, I'm gonna just do this just so that the next run through it knows. Would you say the slippery slope is a logical fallacy? I really like this topic, actually. I think that like I find that the slippery slope is often, or it could be a decent argument. Like it could be like it obviously requires more. So that's why you might say that a slippery slope, or I might say a slippery slope is not necessarily a logical fallacy. Because you could probably make an argument that like this thing is analogous to these other things in such a way that because of the direction that this thing is taking at this rate, therefore it's plausible or likely that this other thing could happen. Honestly, don't think it is, at least not all the time. Yeah, I agree. 100%. Yep. Yeah, I think that this is another reason why it would be really fun to make some sort of Dante's Inferno, because we can see how, like, not only can we judge perhaps what must be going on in a person's mind for them to fall into a fallacy or use a fallacy, And perhaps the tricky thing is figuring out which of those verbs actually makes more sense for the fallacy. Like, is it someone falling into something, or is it someone like actually using it nefariously? But yeah, I would say that, you know, slippery slope would probably be at like the top ring, not even like that would probably be all the fallacies that we would not think are that crazy. And I'm gonna make this video regardless, but I think it would benefit from Alex, so I'll wait a little while. And if it's like, you know, a year from now and there's no budge, and we're looking at no growth, then I'll just make it. What about the ad hominem? I think ad hominem is somewhat similar. Now, yeah, an ad hominem, it's almost more damning, not in a logical sense, but more on a, yeah, it's like it's weird because it's like not respectable, but I think it could actually provide a logical argument. Like, provided it's relevant. This is another thing. It's like it requires more precision. If you can point out how, so like, yeah, I guess you could say that it's not an ad hominem if you could find the relation, but the relation part is the tricky part. It's like you've shown that you can do something like this, or you've shown that that you're like this in some way. Therefore, that might actually suggest how you might behave in this other thing. So yeah, that's the tricky part. Ad hominems are tricky, but they, you know, once again, like they are, like you are going into a different, like despite it not necessarily being a fallacy, it might be a, you know, it might lose some rungs of this Dante's Inferno layers, because it is just a, like, you must be operating in a certain way for you to leverage that. That said, perhaps there is like a really good reason to bring up that, I don't know. For example, Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote a treatise about educating and raising children called Emile. Rousseau, however, was known to give his children to adoption because he said he could not care for them. So when we read Rousseau, we arrive at a dilemma. Yes, like I could, you know, obviously one can make that argument, and you know, I find that argument pretty compelling, but I also find it compelling, like if the defense was he wanted to, you know, he didn't want to raise children because he thought he could use his time elsewhere or something like that, then, you know, that doesn't actually conflict with perhaps the stuff he's trying to say in that treatise. Yo, local dadman, what's good? I have a question for you and the AI that will analyze this comment. Why don't we have a word for someone whose choices are influenced by someone in power? Ooh, do we not have a word for that? This is up with, we have to deal with automatic concerns and biases, and we've discussed biases on this. Oh, I should be updating this one. Oh, what am I doing? The reason why I want to have this separate one is because we can actually download this separate document as a markdown, so that when I paste it into Gemini, it keeps the structure here. No, that's good. That's on topic. We only have words that imply weakness. Influenced by, so I think we do have a word for this. Well, so first of all, we have a very general word where I would describe someone like that as compromised, but that's very general. It's not specific enough. Can we get ChatGPT on this? That's not ChatGPT. Do we have a word? I can think of compromised, but that's rather vague. It doesn't logically conflict, no, but it is a question. But it is questionable from Rousseau. Yep. Yeah, I mean, so like, let's just say the treatise was not about children, right? Like, what if it was a treatise just about being a good neighbor? Like, now, is it still suspect that this guy is giving away his children? Like, maybe he can't talk about morality at all. And then, you could go even deeper. Like, let's just say this is a treatise on economics. And then you might say, this guy doesn't do this thing that I find that's moral. Like, he does something immoral. Like, why should we listen to this guy on this other topic? And then we get to Hassan. All right, I gotta chill. I don't want to get political. All right, now there's also the Nietzsche. Socrates was wrong because he's just ugly. And that's a real ad hominem. Yeah, that's insane. Compromise implies weakness. That touches. So yeah, the question is, what do you mean by weakness here? Like, you're influenced by someone in power. Are you implying that there's a choice that they make and they could either succumb to weakness and be influenced, or they can be influenced in such a way that they're like positively influenced, like they're inspired? Could we not say inspired? But we only have words that uplift the powerful and subvert against the normal person. Yeah, I'm not sure what angle we're getting at here, where I think people that are influenced by power, by someone in power, will convince themselves that they're not, almost like innately, unless they're like inspired. But usually there's some type of pressure now on the way that they think, where they are forced or very much incentivized to think in a certain way. So I don't know, maybe that is like it's like a mix of confirmation bias and a mix of we got to go back to all the biases. We do have a list somewhere. Loss of anchoring, availability, cognitive biases, and okay. I guess we don't have one. I mean, we'll list out a bunch more biases by the time we actually write this thing, but we only have words that almost like we only have true actors and their agendas. Well, that's I mean, not to go too crazy, but that's why power is actually quite a compelling lens through which to view things. Like, the fact that someone who's influential because of their wealth or their status, whether that is political, governmental status, or literally just their status as in the social group, like, they do get to have power now over how other people not only behave, but literally how their minds change, how their understanding changes, how their conscience changes, which is insane. That's why even though I'm not too stoked about the postmodern, let's view the whole thing just through power. I am pretty open to this idea of let's use power as one of, like, maybe a way that we could look through like situations. Obviously none of that stuff is relevant for the document, but okay. Maybe it's because when the socio-linguistic forms of English were forming, societies was bending towards a form of elite, and that culture had to come down from said elite. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. So I guess I should just say I'm not quite grasping here, like, how the language is pro-elite, but chances are the elite had the grasp over language, so that would make sense. Maybe, but all of us have potential. Think of it, for example, the word noble. When I say You are so noble, I usually don't mean literally that the person is an aristocrat, right? I mean, merely mean that they're a good person or something akin. It would take a change to remove power. Look at the ChatGPT response. It's all negative. Okay. Right. So I guess back to my original question. I'm not understanding like what the positive version of this would be. Like in theory, we value volition, and we value deliberate freedom. We value freedom. So for someone's mind to be affected by someone else, I would think of that as negative. Not necessarily because it leads you to a place that you don't want to go, but it's literally conflicting against your own freedom. Would you like being called a sycophant or noble? And what does that say about the underlying power? Well, it doesn't matter what I would like to be called. I wouldn't want to be influenced by people that are powerful in certain situations, but I guess, well, yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the reason why we love free speech. It's like we don't want to actually have that negative imposition on us. It would be negative for me to start thinking that I shouldn't be saying this thing that I'm actually thinking, because it could get me in trouble. That's like the whole idea. So I would characterize that as negative. I mean, the noble thing is pretty obvious, but I think that's a different conversation. But yeah, each with slightly different shades of meaning that describes someone whose decisions or choices are influenced by a person in power, subordinate. So this is a little more direct. Sycophant, this is certainly this is negative, where someone's actually leveraging the power now. They're taking advantage of the power, but perhaps they're also succumbing. So this is a two-way road here. Subordinate kind of feels one way, not in a Hegelian sense, but in a, in people's, the way they're interpreting the situation. Toady, yikes. Person who behaves ubiquitously towards someone important, similar to a sycophant. Yeah, and the reason why these could have negative connotations doesn't necessarily mean, the reason why doesn't seem to only be an argument that it's like the elite who set these up. Like, people that are not in power would find it very distasteful that their peers are sucking up to the person in power for the sake of some gain that they're not going to get, or a gain that's at the loss of them. So, this could actually be the non-powerful people who want these connotations to be negative, because we don't want this type of behavior. Yes, man. Okay, so client, protege, vassal. But of course, if this is one where you could say this is affected by the elite, pointing out that if someone's such a good steward, that they could be a protege or a vassal. Co-opted, compromised. Yeah, I want to focus solely on the context of someone being influenced without realizing so. Does free speech actually allow a free society, or only free action? Whoa. What does free society mean, and what does free action mean? I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about with that one. But again, if you only have the actions allowed by the powerful, there's no word for a normal person. I came up with Octor or Augundus. Yeah, I also think that language was probably very much shaped by non-powerful people, because there's just significantly more non-powerful people. and language gets shaped over use, and powerful people have to just pick up that language, at least, you know, within the past few hundred years. Like the actor and agenda. Oh, I see. I see. Yeah. I guess I'm still not understanding where a positive connotation could be. Like if you're getting affected by someone who's imposing power on you, whether they know it or not, right? Like there's the discussion about how content creators or big influencers or famous people in general don't realize that they have a certain social pressure as they interact with other people. That's how all these like really weird social dynamic questions come up. And yeah, like a lot of times the famous people don't realize that this is at play. So it's not necessarily nefarious, but it is having an effect. That's how just influence literally means influence. And that's why influencer has so much responsibility. Puppet. Yikes. Cat's paw. Dupe. Instrument. How about when neither party is aware of it? I'm thinking how someone of status walks into a room and other people are literally drawn to look, not necessarily at the deliberate intention of the person of status. That's a sharp and subtle distinction. You're describing influence without intention on either side, a kind of ambient, unconscious social pull rather than deliberate manipulation or submission. There isn't a single perfect everyday word for this. English tends to frame influence as either willed or received, persuasion, control, or being manipulated. But there are a few terms and conceptual framings that get very close depending on what aspect you want to emphasize. Charisma. So, yeah, we can, you know what? A positive one is drawn. Like, I'm drawn to this. Like that's somewhat positive, even though you're kind of being affected in a way that you didn't previously agree to. It's not voluntary. I'm drawn to this, maybe this speaker or something like that. It's in the amount of words that can describe the powerful versus the willful or ignorant, meek. See, there's no words. Yep, ask it for one in Greek or Latin. Oh, are there words for that in Greek and Latin? Like, is that what you're getting across? That there's none in English, but there are in other languages? They have good self-exploration, especially when it came to power. Because that's pretty interesting. Aura. Gravitas, presence, social gravity, a field effect, halo effect. How about the negative version of when there's no deliberation on either party? So let's say that your brother is dealing with some morally dubious people, and now you have a responsibility, and separately you are given a responsibility, perhaps to a city to make choices for the people, for the innocent people, and against the against the nefarious people. You may be swayed unwittingly against a decision that would negatively impact your brother, even though it may negatively impact the innocent people who you swore to protect. Oh, man. All of those are the positive. Oh, you caught it? Uh-oh. Stan, I have some news. Yikes. Yes, willfully ignorant, but without the negative connotation. All right, that's, you're describing a form of bias or distortion born not of manipulation or intent, but of unconscious emotional alignment or entanglement. Neither party acts deliberately. The influence arises from implicit loyalties, affinities, or relational pull. There isn't a single everyday English word that perfectly encapsulates this. We should have this word. We should make this word. Now, this is why I brought up compromise in the beginning. Oh, no. Is someone else jumping on this? Against panpsychism. Is this all we've got? We just got a, wait, TLDR, to convincingly argue for panpsychism, you would first need to get a Nobel Prize in physics. Thoughts? All right, either it's the case or should I start on this or should I continue with this right now? I'm gonna get to this in 1 second. I wanna continue what we were just talking about, but we need this word. We got a word. We found one. I'll let it rip. Or are you saying that we need this word? Like the word that I'm trying to say? Because I think, oh, actually, conflict of interest is actually pretty good. That's better than compromise, I think. Oh, bro has 8 upvotes and 53 comments. It's not looking good. What you're saying for the you're saying people are against him? I think that's good. I was honestly, Onion Helmet, I was more concerned that people would see my thing and be like, yeah, that's old news. Like, obviously. Yeah, no, the thing that we've got going for ourselves is the entire argument. Like, it's not just that any argument against panpsychism is going to be shot down. It's that an ill-developed one would be. But we've got the firepower. They've got to deal with the firepower that we offer. But if the subreddit doesn't care for us, then we got to just hope that, either the algorithm cares or we get picked up at some later point. I don't know. I think it's going to be a banger video. And if it just sits on our channel without many views, then I will still feel proud of it. Okay. Yeah. I'll read that. I'll make sure that we read that. Make sure that I've got a better argument actually, but 53 fighter jets, 50 tanks, 100, I don't even know, howitzers, ready to go to engage, sir. Yes, sir. Yep. I'm not here for a straw man. I stand. Man, so much rhyming. Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about, what I tried to do here is I tried to ensure that we take a lot of time to actually build up the panpsychist version or argument. Now, I should say this. If there is a strong panpsychism, Alex did not give it. the argument I make here definitely I think definitely beats out at what Alex said in that in that discussion. There's a chance that I've missed something though, in like the actual panpsychism lore. I don't know, whatever it is, the panpsychism doctrine, whatever you would call it. And there's a chance that I missed that, but I think it's sound. I can shitpost a video with some absurd premises and conclusions to draw attention to you. I think we'll be fine. I don't know. I'm kind of delusional about a lot of things, but I think we'll be fine. Yeah, no, I've been trying to. This is long, but I've been trying to cut it down too, so that it's not, so that it reads well and it's engaging. And I think I'm gonna have to have some B-roll, probably just pictures or like a GIF here and there. I don't know if I should. I'm wondering if I should make any AI B-roll. Like AI B-roll would be so nice. Not so when I say that, not just like crazy images or videos that look like AI, but using AI to create really fitting videos. But I don't know if people are going to not like that. So why Alex O'Connor is wrong and doesn't know anything about philosophy. Dude, Alex O'Connor could run laps on me on philosophy at large. I was trying to write a collegiate paper describing power for a friend, and I couldn't come up with a word for the common man who might be unaware of the effects the powerful has. I just wanted your thoughts before I shoot off this paper. LOL. Well, I'm sorry if I didn't give any. But yeah, this is what I was thinking. This is what comes to mind. This is what I'm actually most interested in, because this is what actually pertains to part 2 of the document. We have to consider these biases. And when I say that, like, the person reading this is going to be told, hey, these biases are at play. Like, whether it's, some type of moral conundrum where you have loyalties to certain people, or if it's some conundrum where someone who is got more power over you is affecting, how you're feeling, whether that's even just your parents. People grow up with their parents' viewpoints and their biases. Then it's like a bad slideshow with a scuffed mic. Local damn, and why not just use a Latin word and pretend it's English like most Anglophone writers? Or you could just use that, the Latin word, and then explain how it's not well translatable. Like how, people do that when they're translating Heidegger and stuff. Alex is great, but he speaks to the common folk. That's what I ended up doing. Okay. But he speaks to the common folk. Doesn't I feel like he speaks to everyone. Like, I feel like he speaks to the real deal guys. Like, he gets in the room with some serious scientists and he talks to them. I don't know if I could do that right now. Nice. What's the word? Oh, nice. I came out. Yep. Yeah, I mean, there might even be some what I want to say, some charm or some added strength in coming up with those words because you've found that hole in our language. Conflict of interest, unconscious or latent, a situation where personal relationships or loyalties subtly distort one's judgment even without awareness. The phrase usually implies deliberation, but in ethics and law, there's recognition of latent or implicit conflicts, ones the person isn't aware of. He wasn't corrupt, but his brother's involvement created an unconscious conflict of interest. So, okay, so do people think corruption is just when people deliberately do something that they know is wrong? That's why compromised is kind of nice. Like, there's certain people that there's certain public figures that I would describe as compromised because of who they're who they're in cahoots with. Alex gets the views. That doesn't mean he has the cutting edge ideas, just a good communicator. Right, but he's yeah, like I think I was just saying he's a good communicator. It's seemingly to not just the common folk, but to the side. Actually, I haven't watched too much Alex O'Connor, but we'll watch more Alex on this channel. I will not in the same in the same light as we're talking about this stuff and how I need to be keeping my eyes out for any types of conflicts of interest that I might run into. Uh, no one can be safe. Like I can't start being nice to Alex if we start collaborating. Uh, or not saying what I think is right. But that's why it's great to be respectful. Provided I'm respectful at all times, then it shows that I'm not showing some bias against someone, even if I am, right? Just unknowingly. Compromise is so subversive, though. What does that mean, subversive? Oh, like it's just there's so much of a. Oh, I see. Um, Yeah, why not just say biased? Like biased, I think people are now a little more empathic about. So, we all have biases. We just don't know what they all are. But if you were to say, this person's biased because his brother's in the dealings with this but he doesn't realize it. Implicit bias. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I actually, this is maybe a crazy take, and this is once again, I should chill before, once we get more people in here. But I actually really like the idea of implicit bias as a concept. Like it is, like I do agree, I do agree that we have to like figure out what the actual implication should be, of the implicit biases we have, but. Implicit actually maybe is not the best word, because implicit means that it's implied based on who, like the other characteristics of you. But this is the tricky part, because we've used implicit understanding in a different way. This is where implicit's not a good enough, like implicit is too ambiguous of a word to use. So it's got to be something like inherent. I mean, that's similar to implicit, but does it have as much weight as implicit? It's not that the bias is implied because of the type of person you are, but it's just that everyone has implicit biases. So it's a question of like what biases are actually implicit in your brain. So yeah, implicit might not be the best word. Implicit is good. We filter objective reality through our subconscious lenses. Yeah, I think the challenge with implicit being so close to implied is that if you start talking about, implicit bias, and you're giving, especially if you start giving like the training to one type of person, then it's implied that implicit is implying that because you're that type of person, you have the bias. Whereas we really are just trying to say that everyone has some type of underlying bias, and we're not saying that everyone has this type of bias, but some people do. And so you have to blanket train. You can't just train like one type of person. And yeah, the tricky thing is like when you're talking about racism, it's like how weird would it be for you to train the person against. But yeah, that's why maybe it wouldn't be just, racism against one type of person. You would say racism at all. And then you get everyone on that. Everyone has to go to the implicit bias training, because we don't know what kind of biases you have. You don't know what kind of biases you have. And so we have to blanket train. But once again, we need to know that the training actually does something. And that was one of the big issues about implicit bias training. All right. I think that I said that in a way that would, one, still be controversial enough to get me in trouble, but not. I said it precisely enough that I think that wouldn't get me in too much trouble. I think that was pretty well said. I'm sure Alex's ideas have been said before. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever heard Alex say like, I have this new fresh idea. He's usually like, the thing that Alex is doing, and perhaps to his own, at least to my displeasure is that he will quote he will quote so many different things, and he will always frame a situation through some lens of some writer or some thinker that, I don't know, but perhaps the people he's talking about do know. And that's, perhaps that helps him out in many cases. I'm always concerned that by leveraging some random analogy, like, we're actually getting less precise than if you were to actually just say what you're trying to say more directly. Isn't that kind of his whole spiel, that he's an educated Graham Hancock? Graham Hancock, that's the guy who was saying that there were societies in South America that were crazy. Is that the guy we're talking? And like 100,000 years ago or something like that. Implicit is good. Okay. The basis is implied as it is effectively applied across everyone. Right. But like, there's two different, what I'm trying to get at is there's two different meanings of implicit that you can infer, and that therefore it might be too ambiguous. Like, we need a word that just means that it's unconscious biases. Boom. That's what we should call it. Unconscious biases. Easy. That's a much less ambiguous. It doesn't imply that just because you're this type of person that you have them. Now, if you were to give a certain type of training to only one type of person, then that would imply that only that type of person has those types of biases. But the biases are in all humans, so you have to blanket train. We are all trying to survive. Yep. All right. Conflict of interest, unconscious. Wait, what? Oh my gosh. I thought I had come up with something good. And it was literally right here. Now, do you think that there was some unconscious bias towards the thinking of this very phrase? Oh, man. That's embarrassing. What else we got? Actually, meaning automatic, unrecognized influences that shape perception and decision making. Covers exactly the no deliberation on either side condition. Yeah, I like this. Unconscious bias. That's great. Partiality, complicity. So someone's complicit, but I think complicit shows wittingly. I don't think complicit is, in my mind. This is why I talked to you first. Is this helping? Are we getting somewhere? Yeah, complicit in my mind just implies that they're willingly doing something, or at least they're cognizant of it. Partiality, that one to me could be unwitting. Like, if someone's impartial, that almost, obviously people might think that is, what was the word you said, subversive? Like, if I said, oh, he's impartial, he shouldn't be able to have a say here, then someone would be like, what, you don't trust that I wouldn't be, that's crazy also. I mean, obviously no one wants to think that they have unconscious biases, but yeah, like, if you're, it's like The Dark Knight. If you're, what was it? Oh, was it your brother who was in the hospital? The guy's grandmother was in the hospital? Oh, man. What was the shtick in The Dark Knight? All right. What was the situation in The Dark Knight where someone's relative was in the hospital during that sequence when the Joker was threatening to blow up a hospital? Man, did the Joker not say which hospital it was? That's insane. It's super complex. Yeah. Power is fun. Yeah, just once again, also, this is part one stuff. Once again, this all comes down to simple not simple, but to mechanisms in the brain that obviously evolved to handle, not to handle, but evolved with like complex social dynamics, which is, you know, why there's so much emotion involved here. And we've got a section on this. Development and social context. Social dynamics and their effect on understanding. Our interactions with others form a dominant contributor to our emotional lives. It is therefore essential as our first step in understanding the broad impact of development and social context to examine precisely how these pervasive social dynamics actively shape the emotional and neuromodulatory landscape that underpins nearly all significant enduring learning. All right. Yeah, so then we got a whole thing about this. Do you like how many words we have to describe the powerful, and it took this long to come up with unconscious bias, and it still kind of tastes bad? I have to admit, I'm not seeing like the type of interpretive, like I'm not seeing the type of interpretation. Like I'm not so much up in arms about this, just because maybe I don't quite understand why it's so bad that this is the case. Like, yeah, I still don't understand why. Oh, also, yeah, to me, it's not necessary. Like, it makes sense that so many of these bias related words would be negative, not because of some top down power, but because this is a virtue that people don't like. Like, this is just something that, you know, people frowned upon. But yeah, I guess we should have more. Perhaps we should have more of a vernacular around unconscious biases. But I don't know if I would blame like any particular person on that. Like, I don't know if there is a blame to throw there. Yes, that's why. That's the why, but not the what. Partiality, moral entanglement. That's kind of neutral. This person's morally entangled. Affective bias, emotional contagion. I think all biases are affective, so. I should have had a question mark. You're referring to a key sequence in The Dark Knight, the hospital evacuation scene connected to the Joker's ultimatum. After escalating chaos in Gotham, the Joker announces that he has rigged hospitals around the city with explosives. His demand, Reese, the Wayne Enterprises accountant who has discovered Batman's true identity, must be killed or he'll blow up a hospital. Oh, and then what was going to happen here? Someone was going to shoot someone. This announcement triggers mass panic. Police rush to evacuate every hospital in Gotham. The key character involved, Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent is hospitalized at this point. He was severely burned. Right? But so when the Joker says Dent is one of the patients in danger, the relevant moral, and when Dent is recovering, James Gordon and the Gotham police are stretched thin trying to protect every hospital. At the same time, people close to Dent face a moral and emotional bind. They must protect the city at large, but they also personally care about Dent. Was this really it? I thought someone had like a grandmother in the hospital or something. But they must also personally care about Dent. This creates a kind of moral entanglement and unconscious bias towards saving one person, even as the Joker manipulates the entire city into chaos. Joker later yep, okay. He persuades, yep. Okay, I could have sworn there was some other thing, but I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about a different yo, Darmadam. What rabbit hole are we in? Oh, we're down a rabbit hole, all right. I could have maybe it's a different movie, but I could have sworn there was something where someone had a relative in a hospital and therefore it affected their behavior. And I don't know why, but I really think it was still Dark Knight. Um, Darwin, we were trying to find words that made sense of when someone is affected by power in a non-negative way. So like something that you could say that this person is affected by power in a way that doesn't make it seem like you're casting shade on the person. So compromised would be too negatively valenced, or yeah, I really like The Dark Knight as a movie. I think that's still one of my top. I know that's like makes me a basic person, but I don't understand. Like, it is nonstop the most exciting movie I've ever seen. Like, it's the entire way through. It's some of the most compelling TV or movie I ever see. Makes me think of Ram. He gave up his kingdom for a promise. Oh, who's that? Ram? Someone who may not be knowledgeable of the effect of power on their choices, of powerful on their choices, and powerful in many different ways. Like perhaps it's, someone who's got like governmental power, but it could also be someone who's got power over your job, or it could be power over literally your next 30 minutes. Maybe someone could hold you up, right? Like why be so, like one of the reasons why you want to be so, I don't know, nice at, what would be a good example of this? Like what's a time when you're highly incentivized to be as nice as you possibly can? When you're pulled over. Well, I guess that's like kind of governmental. But what would be another one where maybe you'll get away, like maybe someone will let you do something or not have to pay, or maybe they'll let you leave, or maybe they'll give you a better seat, something like that. Yeah, I mean that's still an effect. Avatar of Vishnu. Hospitality jobs, yeah, like be nice to the waiter, and they might, I mean, I guess they might not spit in your food, but they might care to bring you your food faster. I'm not sure. Yes, it honestly came out of an examination of the relationship between a teacher and a student. Ooh, okay, that'll do it. And yeah, once again, like there's power where the student wants to, not only so that they don't get in trouble, but so that they get a better grade. Like, what kind of biases must a teacher have to deal with when they're doing subjective grading? So, like, when they're grading a paper and they're deciding on how coherent it is. Like, that's not clear cut. Granted, you could always dock points for punctuation, but yeah, there is some subjective component there. This sounds like Confucius stuff. Ooh. Maybe we should do a Confucius rabbit hole at some point. All right, should we jump back to where we started here? Oh no, we have to we have to go down our second rabbit hole, which is reading this guy's Against Panpsychism and making sure that ours is going to. I'm actually just like Onion Helmet posted this. I'm glad that there's enough. I'm glad that there's a lot of comments. Like if I would be pretty stoked if there was, regardless of how many upvotes we had, like 50 comments. And the other thing that we could do, so I don't know, on the Cosmic Skeptic, this conversation felt like a Christian pastor took his atheist son to get evaluated by a psychiatrist. Oh, man, that's phenomenal. I was considering, I think this wouldn't fly. I was considering making the thumbnail be the Christian guy, but I just cut out his face and I put mine like smiling. But I think that would be insane. So, um, the horoscope grift. Uh-oh. Though I think Jordan always had a foot in the broader spiritual. How many videos are allowed to be posted here? And okay, this is another question. How many posts happen here? Oh, we're chilling. Oh my gosh. No one's posting on this subreddit. Everyone's going to see this video. This is amazing. All right. All right. I gotta make sure that it's good now. I don't know much, but he was into thinking about the various relationships in society. Yeah, the only reason that we have to talk about this stuff really is the biases that it could have on you. And when I say you, I mean everyone that reads this document. Like that's part of part 2. It's considering what biases are affecting the way that you're thinking and making sure that you're aware of that for the sake of actually pursuing the goal that you want to pursue and not being steered off course because of some influence. There's power in both roles, but bias in the power of both roles is apparent in both. Maybe I need to look into the Eastern teachings. Yeah. Yeah, and like just to be clear, this is not the same thing as Hegel's master-servant dialectic. Like that touches on something that is much more fundamental and low level in terms of theory of mind as far as I'm concerned. I mean, perhaps he actually does, think about in that way, where the person that has power is you know what? Maybe you could think about it in the way that the person has power is being influenced by what the people want or what the people don't want. In some sense, you could have that whole discussion, audience capture. But I think that's a different topic. Okay. What am I doing here? I'm trying to read this guy's post. Either it's the case or not the case that from some mathematical physical model, the possible behaviors of matter are derivable. Let's call this the physicalist hypothesis. All right, what's going on here? We're going in an entirely different direction than I thought we would be going into. Mathematical physical model, what does that mean? If pH is false, then sure, there is room for woo-woo theories of consciousness like panpsychism and idealism and whatever else. pH is true, however, and it's the case that the human vocal cords are made of matter, and then a human verbally espousing a belief in panpsychism is one such behavior that is derivable from the mathematical model alone. I think this is to describe the physical world as like the mathematical model, I think is already making an error right off the bat. Like mathematical models are interpretive lenses to put on top of basically something empirical, so something you're able to measure. So it's already assuming some type of measure. Even though we say that the physical world follows these laws and that are mathematical in representation, that isn't really like what the physical universe is at bedrock. Like we kind of don't know. So what we do is we find these ways of describing the behavior of the physical world through our empirical lens, and we come up with mathematical models that allow us to predict the behavior. I'm going to take this document to a bunch of classical musicians, and we're going to put out a pompous treatise on how music is highly important in achieving your goals. Then we will give 20% of the proceeds to you. Okay, go do it. That sounds good to me. How music is highly... I don't know if we're going to have have that discussion, unfortunately, in part 2. But we'll see. Maybe there is something that says that music affects your cognitive ability in some way. Yeah, I'll revisit that too. I thought it was different too. Thanks for entertaining it. Ew, my brain is toast for the day. Yeah, no, I feel you. This stuff could probably, you know, make your brain toast after considering power dynamics. Since that behavior is derivable from the mathematical model on its own, no extra physicalist assumptions about consciousness are needed to explain it, so panpsychism collapses into triviality. Anytime an argument is being made for something extra, that something extra is not actually needed to exist in order to explain the believer's proselytizing. What might seem like insights gained from a psychedelic trip or whatever actually cannot be insights beyond physicalism unless pH is false. So if panpsychism is meaningfully true and can be meaningfully argued for, then pH must be false. For pH to be false, it means that there is no mathematical model that adequately describes the possible behavior of matter. Yeah, so I think this guy made a like a deep error with how he's using the mathematical model here, and I think this is what happens with philosophers. They'll like set up something where the logic then ends up making sense, right? Like with his premise, the logic is sound, but the premises are not sound, and therefore the logic falls apart, or the logic is like rendered useless. Yeah. Thoughts? Question mark. Many have pointed out that I am just using the term physicalist incorrectly. Thank you for that correction. I was also wrong to call panpsychism and idealism woo-woo. They are serious positions to hold, whereas woo-woo suggests they can be dismissed out of hand, which is not true. Firstly, the definition of physicalism you use is non-standard. Many people would explicitly include a statement that the fundamental constituents are not mental. Right. Panpsychism is perfectly compatible with mathematical equations fully determining behavior. Right. In physics, all mathematical equations do is describe behavior. They cannot tell what something actually is. Okay, so this is pretty much what I just said. In other words, we have an equation that tells us how the electron behaves. However, it cannot tell us what an electron really is or why it has the behavior it does. Same with gravity. Panpsychism aims to explain this. When we say electrons are attracted to positive charges, a panpsychist would say that this is because the electron desires to be closer to positive charges. That is, laws of physics are determined by the dispositions of fundamental matter. I would argue that, panpsychism is somewhat an anthropomorphication. An anthropomorphication? Is that a word? Anthropomorphize? Nah, I think I'm going to call it there on that one. He smoked grass instead of eating fungus. Who was that? Oh, did someone say that? Because that's actually really funny. If someone, maybe you just made that joke, because I think that's pretty funny. The Reddit OP. Did they say that though? Okay, well that's 5 points for great joke. No, he brought up tripping though. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean there was that whole discussion about the psychedelic use involved there. Yeah, so Yeah, I take it that you need like a slightly more, or you need a nicer argument, obviously, than what that guy just said, what that person just said, and the way I go about it is first to start attacking the what I consider to be the straw man arguments of what Alex said, which would be something like the subjective intuition about psychedelics. You know, we can consider the most compelling evidence for panpsychism its intuitive phenomenological charm, especially regarding psychedelic, spiritual, or religious experiences. The argument is that since these experiences feel like an expansion of consciousness while the brain activity decreases, decreases and desynchronizes, the brain must be a filter that has been temporarily opened. However, I believe that this is a straw man of the neurobiological position. The materialist view doesn't require a simple linear relationship where more brain activity equals more conscious experience. This phenomenon does not disprove that the brain generates consciousness. It merely indicates a more complex relationship, likely involving the suppression of filtering networks like the default mode network. So while you might subjectively feel, actually, I should say the desynchronization here of filtering networks like the default mode network. So while you might subjectively feel that your mind is open, it's more scientifically accurate to say that your mind is profoundly altered than expanded. I'll stick to lurking. I really like the way you describe fundamentals in your paper. Nice, thank you. Yeah, I think we're pretty grounded so far. Stan rocking up to the Alex O'Connor debate with his goons by his side. I would lose that debate though. Like even if I have like if we could debate via documents like one at a time and I get to like really think through what's being written here. Like I think that's where I shine, where I get to like sleep on it and then really consider the logic. In the moment, I don't know if I, you know, he could probably out debate me sixfold. I heard we have a problem, Alex. I'm gonna stand up, King. I'm gonna need one of those SpongeBob, the tall hat where he's got the thing in his head, and I'm gonna need me from tomorrow morning to be talking in my ear. All right. The scientific hurdles, combination and mechanism. So this is a slightly more, you know, a slightly bigger attack. So yeah, we're going small to big in terms of the attacks. Like I take that the subjective attack to be the weakest argument towards panpsychism, just because it feels, you know, that it's crazy or whatnot, just because it feels like your mind is open or that these experiences are absolutely novel or absolutely overwhelming or breathtaking. Like that does not imply anything about, that doesn't imply that your brain's not actually affecting those experiences. So you'd have to go to something else. Even if we grant even if we grant, we should say panpsychism, its Steelman philosophical premises, it runs into two massive scientific hurdles. First is the combination problem. It's incredibly difficult to explain how billions of tiny, simple points of micro-consciousness in atoms could combine to create the single, unified, and complex conscious experience of a person. But the bigger issue is the lack of a testable mechanism. As we've seen, the homeostatic model provides, that's the model we give as an alternative. It's basically the one that's actually grounded in the neuroscience. That model provides a clear evolutionary trajectory. Panpsychism does not. For the brain to have evolved as a filter for, or specifically evolved to filter, some fundamental consciousness, that consciousness would have needed to exert some kind of selective pressure on our evolution. As far as I understand, there's currently no evidence of this. Furthermore, the filter hypothesis offers no plausible physical mechanism for how a brain would receive or filter this consciousness. If we take it that some fundamental consciousness simply comes along for the ride of evolution, yet it still affects our conscious experience, then we must identify how this mechanism operates, intrinsically or extrinsically to the brain and body. What part of the brain receives or filters this consciousness? Once again, without a testable mechanism, panpsychism remains unfalsifiable and moving it out of the realm of science and into pure metaphysics. Because of the lack of evidence, scientifically speaking, panpsychism is speculative at best and implausible at worst. Yikes. Alex would entertain that, I bet, if you sent him a letter. Well, I guess I will. I mean, maybe he'll see his subreddit. But the goal is to get his attention. With Joey Diaz, what am I going to talk with Joey Diaz? The final blow, a problem of precision and pragmatism. So this is the type of argument that only we can make, I think, because of what we talk about in part 1 of the document. And you know what? I should just read that part just so that we know, or the part that actually builds this up. So we talk about the embodied aspect. You know, I talk about this all the time, how our experience is embodied, not in the sense that it just like feels like, you know, things have to do with our body, like, you know, meaning feels a certain way and whatnot. You know, we build up this idea that the brain is in constant communication with the body, and what we feel while we have experiences of meaning is actually the body. Like we, you know, when we are like fearful, like the experience of fear is one that's actually caused by like our heartbeat or our muscles tensing. Like the experience of fear is one that's actually coming from our body. Like something, you know, we learn something that makes us fearful. It affects how our body, like the physiology of our body, how it physically is, and that then is experienced as feeling, and that affects how we, not only how we perceive the world, but how, you know, the mechanisms in our brain and body transpire. This embodied framework highlights what meaning actually feels like. It grounds it not in abstract logic, but in the visceral affective evaluation of our well-being. A situation that promises to enhance our well-being feels positive and attracts us. A situation that threatens it feels negative and repels us. These patterns don't stay confined to the brain. They are distributed across our muscles, posture, breathing, and internal sensations. A threat makes the heart race. A comforting memory can ease tension in the body. These aren't secondary effects. They are integral parts of how meaning manifests in our experience. If you actually get Joey Diaz on the podcast, he'll drop some real philosophical takes. He'll entertain whatever you're talking about and get you a few 100,000 views. Okay, let's get Joey Diaz on. That would be a lot of fun. Give him a script to read. That'd be hilarious. All intellectual. I mean, I would probably just kind of... The question I want to ask anyone on a podcast right now is, what should be in part 2 or part 3 of the document? I'm not going to ask people what should be in part 1 of the document. They probably... I don't trust that they're going to, like, have some take on that. But everyone's going to have a take of, like, what should actually be in part 2. Like, perhaps in relation to their own life. Like, what was really effective for them to achieve the goals that they have achieved. And that will, like, having that conversation with everyone that I talk to is going to make sure that we don't have holes in the document. So I think that's what I would ask everyone. And I think that could become a conversation that lasts at least an hour for no matter who I'm talking about or to who I'm talking with. All right, so then we get to the more fun stuff, the affective aspect of rational thought. So this embodied perspective goes even further, suggesting that our most rational thoughts are guided by our broader physiology. Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis explains how the brain uses these felt states to guide our choices. When faced with a decision, our brain rapidly simulates potential outcomes and generates an associated visceral bodily feeling a somatic marker for each one. A positive feeling of ease pushes us towards a decision. A negative feeling of unease or alarm pushes us away. This is the neurobiological basis for our gut instincts, revealing how even our most logical decisions are profoundly shaped by the body's wisdom in predicting future states of well-being. Should I say rational thought here? How even our most rational thinking is profoundly shaped. Thought is even our most rational thought. Do I? Oh no, I already say rational thoughts. Okay, so logical thinking is fine. All right, check the bar on top. Wait, this is the wrong document. The bar on top. What's the bar on top? Are we talking in the document? Are we talking about this anonymous dinosaur? We gotta ask Google for an anonymous penguin and anonymous kiwis. If there's not any of those, I'm online right now on Google for real, scouring through the document. No worries. Yeah, go for it. Scour through. Okay. All right. This fundamentally challenges the classic intuitive view of a conflict between reason and emotion. The idea that we can make purely logical decisions separate from the messy influence of our feelings is a deeply ingrained but neurobiologically unfounded myth. In this embodied view, our feelings are not a bug in the system. They're an essential feature that makes effective reasoning possible in the first place. The exercise in deliberately doing things now for the sake of affecting what feels rational to us in the future will be a topic that this channel discusses, but not in this video. I might cut that. That's probably not necessary, even though people might be interested. Though, you know what I probably should do is front load that sentence with, we won't discuss this in the video, but this channel it's something like, if this interests you, this channel will discuss ... something like that. I'll have to figure it out. But something where we're basically like advertising the cool stuff about the channel, but not necessarily getting too lost in that. Then I say, okay, we can get even more crazy as we further consider the implications of this perspective. If our feelings and decisions are tied to our body's state, what does that mean for our most deeply held beliefs? So then we play that, but the beliefs aren't in the brain clip. And the only reason we're playing this clip is because Alex says, I think I agree. So then we say, from an embodied perspective, he's right in a way. Our understanding of the world isn't just a set of abstract facts stored in our neural architecture. Our beliefs are made aware to us through consciousness, which is itself a product of our entire physiological state. The feeling of certainty about a belief, for example, is merely a feeling, a homeostatic state influenced by everything from our memories and cultural context to our hormones and even the signals coming from our gut. We can consider how memory operates to reshape the explicit meaning we think about. Empirical science shows us that memory is an active reconstructive process. As we discussed, our brain creates a mapping of our experience, and that mapping is stored via neuroplasticity. Then, every time we recall that memory, we aren't just replaying a file from a cabinet, we are actively reconstructing it, reactivating the connections associated with specific related stimuli. Retrieving a memory makes its underlying neural trace temporarily malleable and open to change, allowing it to be updated with new context or feelings before it's saved again through a process called reconsolidation. Crucially, this reconstructive process changes our memories. Through a natural process of synaptic pruning, the specific, vivid details often fade, leaving behind the core lesson. So this is actually kind of redundant here, right? or it's either that's redundant or this might be out of place. This might be out of place given the following paragraph. Vivid details often fade, leaving behind the core lesson or a more generalized schematic pattern. But crucially, it's not just the factual content that changes. The emotional charge of the memory can also evolve. For example, a traumatic memory through therapy or new life experiences can be recalled with less fear and arousal, even if the facts remain the same. Conversely, a seemingly neutral childhood memory can take on a warm, positive glow as we gain new perspective in adulthood. Here's the vital point. This dynamic process of memory isn't just for remembering past events. It is the fundamental engine that underpins our entire experience and understanding of meaning itself. Every perception, every thought, every gut feeling of intuition is the result of all these processes we have discussed. It is the experience of feelings combined with the brain activating a learned neural pattern. The meaning we experience in any given moment, whether it's understanding a spoken word, recognizing a social cue, or feeling the importance of an idea, arises as our brain generates an affective experience through the lens of consolidated memory-based patterns. All right. Have you thought about writing a blog? If I do, it would have to be. I think it would have to be. What's that one site that is popping off? That's pretty much a blogging site. Substack. It would be a Substack, and it would be probably a mix between. I've talked about this before. Maybe having weekly summaries of what happens on stream. That might be nice. And maybe mixed with, if we did like video notes and transcripts or video scripts. So imagine that if you subscribe to the Substack, and I would definitely want Substack to be I would want the majority of the content to be effectively free. I don't know if we want to leverage any subscription. I have to still feel that out. But perhaps there's something that like people wouldn't want, and that's what we use a subscription for. But I could always just post the video scripts to Substack and just have that be a thing that people can have. I like blogs because they often tackle obscure topics, so someone searching might stumble upon it. So yeah, I think perhaps we should just do that for the sake of marketing, just getting everything out there. Obviously, I'll make a video on it as well, and I do like making videos on just obscure topics, or I like the idea of it at least. And we'll always try to use use what we talk about in the document on those obscure topics. All right, the same neural process of pattern recognition is at work, whether the stimulus is an external object, an internal concept, an emotional feeling, or a cognitive habit. So in tracing this path, we see a clear progression. Attention and emotionally charged events drives the formation of memories. These memories enable the recognition of patterns in both our external world and our internal landscape of thoughts. With repetition, these patterns become our automatic habitual ways of understanding. This brings us to a crucial distinction. Our understanding, this entire library of patterns, memories, and concepts, exists physically as a vast, complex web of neural connections. But we don't experience the web itself. We only ever experience the activation of those connections. And since this very activation affects the connections involved, our understanding is constantly, if subtly, evolving. This means the understanding that we think we possess at any given moment is merely the current state of this ongoing adaptive process. So, just to reiterate, as this is incredibly important to understand, while we can step back and subjectively reflect on what we understand, our beliefs, and more broadly, the purpose of our lives, we must recognize that these beliefs are experienced through consciousness as a result of underlying neural activation, operating merely as a key part of a much larger homeostatic system. The exercise in conceptualizing the concepts that subjectively arise for us is philosophical, and while we don't discuss that in this video, this is something I will soon cover in depth on this channel, so stick around if you're interested. So that's a similar thing. You know what? I'm going to take away the one that I just talked about here. This, even though we are going to talk about this is kind of high level to advertise for. But this one, the one down here, is actually like literally what we're going to be talking about. Not in the next reading video, but the major section after that of the document read-throughs. All right, so the reason why I went through that is because of the argument that I make next. So the scientific hurdles, actually, no, the final blow, a problem of precision and pragmatism. Now, because we went the extra mile with our discussion of meaning and understanding, we can even make a philosophical argument against the conception of panpsychism. As we've established, our entire understanding of the world, from the concept of a chair to the feeling of certainty about a belief, is an ongoing adaptive process built from the biological machinery of our embodied minds. This means that each person's interpretation of an event or concept is different. Given this, we have to recognize that grand abstract phrases like fundamental matter of the universe or universal consciousness are profoundly ambiguous. Each person will infer a completely different meaning from them. When we build a framework to understand reality, precision is paramount. A theory's power comes from its ability to provide a shared language that allows us to make specific empirical observations and testable predictions. And this is where the two frameworks reveal their fundamental difference in pragmatic utility. Damasio's theory of homeostasis provides that level of precision. It grounds its concepts, feelings, attention, meaning in observable empirical phenomena like neural networks, somatic markers, and endocrine system responses. I should just say affective responses. These are concrete things we can measure, test, and build upon. Panpsychism, in contrast, relies on concepts that are by their very nature untestable and ill-defined. What precisely is the proto-consciousness of an electron? How exactly does it combine with others? These questions are unanswerable because the terms themselves are not operationally defined. They don't give us anything to measure or test. This is more than just a mere semantic or scientific issue. It's a philosophical and pragmatic one. A framework that cannot make specific, falsifiable predictions cannot be built upon. It becomes a philosophical dead end. It may be an interesting thought experiment, but it fails to provide the utility of a robust practical theory. So then, summary and practical direction. So where does this leave us? Ultimately, this debate presents a choice between a non-scientifically grounded, speculative, and merely metaphysical hypothesis and a scientifically grounded, though still speculative and incomplete, theory. Thus, this choice is about which standard of inquiry we commit to. One path offers a metaphysical solution that, while compelling, relies on concepts that are currently ambiguous, untestable, and unfalsifiable. The other, while acknowledging its own gaps, adheres to the rigorous standards of the scientific method, proposing falsifiable hypotheses grounded in the observable world of biology. That said, to be absolutely clear, the hard problem of consciousness is not yet resolved, and we still don't quite understand how our underlying biological mechanisms generate the subjective experience we can each intuit. And so this is what I've added since the last time I read this. However, our framework suggests that the difficulty of the hard problem may not stem from a ghost in the machine, but from the inherent nature of the machine trying to understand itself. Think of it this way. Our very ability to ponder consciousness, or to even mindfully pay attention to our consciousness, relies on a conceptual understanding of consciousness that our brain has learned and now reconstructs. We are using a product of the system to analyze the system itself. As we've established, our understanding is a dynamic and subjective biological process. While our subjective experience feels obvious, our conceptual grasp of it is filtered through our unique, ever-changing neural architecture. Perhaps this is why consciousness is so difficult for each of us to pin down. Thus, I suggest that using our intuitive sense of consciousness as the foundation for a grand theory about the nature of the universe is a philosophically precarious step. Rather, a more practical and productive direction involves starting from stable empirical ground by focusing on shared, observable, and testable biological phenomena in conjunction with the subjective experiences they strongly correlate with. We can collaboratively and cumulatively build a more precise and reliable understanding from the ground up. And then we have the closing towards a purposeful life. This is kind of going in a different direction, but yeah, I just wanted to read through that. Hopefully I didn't lose everyone, but that I think is the effective counter that only this channel could make. But with that said, if that felt like it was very hard to follow or it was illogical in any way, please let me know. It's kind of high level in a sense. So I don't know if like, I don't know if people are going to be, are going to perhaps understand it on like a first run through, but because obviously the stuff that we talk about in part one and in those sections is rather controversial. All right, we're at an hour 46. We have not done too much on this part two outline, unfortunately. But with that said, I have to leave myself enough time to be able to do one run through of Hades. So we might have like 20 minutes. Where were we? We were talking about the biases, but then we got to identifying what to pursue as a topic. Tools and concept, and then goal setting. I feel like goal setting is a tool and concept here. From vague desires to actionable plans, a well-defined goal acts as a powerful organizing principle for your attention and motivation. Oh, that's a great way to say it. Tools and concepts, goal setting theory, explain why specific and challenging goals. Okay, so this is where we can get into the actual theories. Specific theories. This would be, did I just miss one? Locke and Latham. I thought I saw Lakoff. Or am I seeing things? Okay. Long-term vision and grit. Combination of passion and perseverance needed for superordinate long-term goals. So that wouldn't be something we would talk about here. But the SMART goals is actually really helpful. Making those explicit. Making SMART goals explicit. The science of achievement, pursuing goals effectively. So this would be the major section of pursuing goals effectively. This section is the core how-to for execution. It details the high-level strategies and low-level tactics for turning intentions into reality. The architecture of action, building habits and routines. Do I have habits before? No, framing habits, learning. I think I had. I forget why I had habits before learning. Why would that logically come before? framing must come first. You know, that's basically a something that comes out of the previous discussion. It's almost like a subset in a sense. Habits, and then learning. Okay, the science of effective learning. I think it's grabbing stuff from the rest of the document, so I think we're chilling. Right, this started out with the document, yeah. Leveraging relationships and community. Yeah, there's got to be a lot more in here. And then we do need the full... Oh, they make this the epilogue. Interesting. That's actually not a bad idea. To make the full practical picture the epilogue. Usually, or not usually, but because of part one's epilogue, I was kind of thinking like what would be a topic that is kind of unrelated, but is related. But I think this would be it. The epilogue, I think the thing that makes this very similar to part one's epilogue is it's something that makes sense of the prologue. Like it addresses the prologue. So in part one of the document, the epilogue makes sense of how collective knowledge can even come about through our very framework that we made up. And in this case, it's answering the question of the prologue, basically saying, okay, here is the full practical picture. And it's basically a summary with extra stuff. And then a bridge to part 3. Yeah, I think we should not have morally good be as... Maybe purposeful. Like, purposeful, I think, encompasses morally good without talking about morals. Fulfilling, emotionally rewarding, and purposeful. All right, so I do want to... All right, maybe I grab these. And then we just download... No, actually, you know what? We should... I should look through and see what's missing that I think I would have wanted. Or what's missing in... Oh, that's not it. That was my... hopefully none of my friends are watching. That's a D&D mega campaign that that a friend and I have been working on. Or had worked on for a while, but then kind of stopped. Which may be used in the future. Oh. There we go. So yeah, what are we missing out here? Prologue, predisposition, attention, focus, motivation, the neuroscience of focus. Okay, identifying goals, creativity. Creativity was missing, so that's something that we need to make sure is in there. Meta goals. So meta goals would be kind of it's a more philosophical discussion of goal setting. No, wait, what was meta goals about? Throughout part 2, we will in fact be picking up specific concrete goals and considering why we want to pursue them, and then actually pursuing them. For example, determining how to identify goals effectively is a goal that we are pursuing here. I feel like that's something that we should talk about in the introduction. We need to consider the meta goals we may implicitly have, begging the question why we even care about. Okay, yeah, these are things that we can talk about. This is in prologue stuff. A meta discussion about premises, presuppositions, etc. That's what we could put in there. Logical reasoning, I think, is missed. That is, we want to put that in the identifying goals, tools, and concepts. This is a part of thinking rationally, right? So this would be logical reasoning, being open, self-identity, and volition. Oh, that's part of like framing. But the clarifying core values is going to be something like, yeah, that's going to be self-identity and volition. Honesty. Oh, honesty as a topic needs to be discussed in hostiny. Honesty needs to be talked about in thought. And it's really just being honest with yourself. We don't really care about being honest with other people as far as that goes. That discussion goes. When we talk about the social stuff, we can talk about honesty with other people and how, you know, also we could talk about communicating clearly and stuff again. Forms of thinking. Oh, writing as a form of thought. Yeah. Speaking therapy. Yeah, so this is where we would want to do that. Forms of thinking. And we could say speaking therapy, etc. And yeah, I guess we would have to talk about some of this stuff here. But this is self-authoring suite is certainly in this discussion. So it's how directed writing exercises help construct a coherent personal narrative. Yeah, that's the discussion there. Then we have making goals explicit. This is goal setting. And we've got psychological theories of goal setting and achievement. Let's just put that here. This would be stuff like self-determination theory if it's relevant, Goal setting theory. That's okay. Locke and Latham. I don't know if we're going to be leveraging a lot of. Okay, this is where it got grit and perseverance. Superordinate goals. This, I mean, this type of discussion I think is more up here in the second major section about motivation, grit, rather than down here. Reflection on values, interests, and possibility. That's what we kind of did, clarifying values. Oh, but yeah, we have to have that discussion about possibility. Reflecting on values, interest, and possibility. And then I should have this just to make sure that Gemini knows what we're saying. Considering possibility. Yeah, so that would be here. Being precise in a speech. That would be in thought. Making explicit, being precise in speech. That leads us to logical reasoning. This is going to be a philosophical discussion as well as a grounded one. The implicit ethics of goals is going to have to be on goal setting. And it's not ethics, it's going to be the implicit rules of goals. Well-defined goal access power. Okay, so that's that. We can even change this. Meta strategies. Here we go. Meta strategies would be something that we talk about actually in the next section here. It's like meta strategies would be these high level things. But I think that's kind of implicit in the discussion we're kind of making. It's like regardless of what goal you're striving for, we can learn how to build habits in order to get there, or we can learn how to learn in order to get there, and we can learn how to frame, which is like, framing is like deliberately applying a bias to ourselves. That's what framing would be. Pursuing goals. This is, yeah, framing, habits, learning. That's fine. Becoming familiar with predisposition. Now we had moved this now all the way up to the top here. This is where reflecting on concerns as they arise. We should make sure that we discuss what we're trying to. So, introduce the key players. And then it's going to be a discussion of each of these. Separately. Ooh, attention and focus should come after we talk about biases, right? Because this is tough. We want to point out that you can pay attention to these biases, but perhaps attention and focus is just a more, yeah, perhaps we should instead not mention that, but then once we talk about the biases, we can bring up as a key topic that we can reflect on biases as they arise. So I think that would be the way of going about that. Dispositions, navigating the effects of social dynamics. Oh, geez. That's part of the biases section, I think. Social dynamics. Recognizing, yeah. Cognitive biases, recognizing social dynamics is pretty much there with the biases. Emotional regulation as a skill. As a skill should be just in parentheses. Understanding your disposition. Now this is something that we probably want to talk about separately than automatic concerns and biases. Perhaps like before that, actually. Our cognitive abilities are not separate from our physical state. Managing our biology is oh, this is techniques to do. We could put this way down as like a final topic there. Man, each major section of this entire document of part 2 is going to be a book worthy, like a book worthy exploration. Biases. We've got all these biases. Nature versus nurture, disposition stuff. That's where did I put that? Yeah, this is gonna be like nature, nurture, where we kind of go. We talk about what we already talked about in part 1, but with a little more depth and a little more like a different perspective. Now it's considering your disposition, your like what's nature versus nurture for you, and what that means practically towards your life. So personality traits, cross-cultural psychology and the diversity of motivational and learning styles. The learning style stuff we could probably talk about once we talk about learning, but we could bring it up and just say that we will talk about it later. Understanding personal circumstances, constraints, and opportunities. That would be, oh, this is your disposition. So maybe it's like your circumstances. Which we could then add in the other stuff. Because that's a personal constraint, essentially. Individual temperament. Oh, yeah. Individual temperament. And psychological disposition, environmental and environmental and socioeconomic circumstances. Nurture disposition. What is this? Cultural biases. We could put that in here as well. Cultural. I guess that's cultural and socioeconomic circumstances. That's where we can discuss scarcity as a topic, which is a huge topic, especially relevant if you're trying to get out of a hole. All right, emotion regulation. That's what we put here. This is like dealing with something that everyone deals with. But obviously, now we could talk about it here, knowing that perhaps maybe it's worth mentioning the differences in temperament. You know, it's just we can now leverage that since it's afterwards. Stress management, emotional regulation, psychological resilience, and anti-fragility, the signals of certainty, and okay. Mood, scarcity. Scarcity is something that we could put in socioeconomic circumstances. Understanding and beliefs. Oh. Do we put that in here? Belief systems? That's kind of the cultural circumstances. Belief systems. Maybe that's our last thing that kind of transitions into the dealing with the concerns and biases. Understanding and belief systems. We got various biases to be categorized. I don't know how that stayed here. We have a biases section, right? Yeah. Dealing with trauma. Oh, that would be. I feel like that's dealing with automatic concerns and biases, but it's like a very specific thing. Oh, dealing with trauma would be just right around emotional regulation. Probably. Pursuing goals that help us pursue goals. This stuff, yeah, this is motivation and focus. That's up where we actually talk about motivation and focus. And hormones and neuromodulators we could talk about in that same. We could introduce it up where we talk about attention and focus and motivation, and then we could talk about it once again in emotional regulation. Cognitive training, though. Oh, cognitive training. That's interesting. Circumstances. This would be individual psychological disposition. Cognitive training. Big Five. Personality. Okay. Nutrition. That's in that later. Yeah, sleep, nutrition. Sleep, exercise, mindfulness, and meditation goes in the. That went in the. Where did we put that? Attention and focus, mindfulness. And it's going to show up everywhere. Like, I think meditation's going to just show up as a recurring character throughout this. Studying. Is this not just learning? Studying. Where do we have that? Learning. Studying. Relaxation. Oh, where would relaxation come into play? That would be similarly in sleep, nutrition, stress management, relaxation. Social dynamics and relationships, we had a section for that, right? This was specific. Oh, this is a different type of thing. Perhaps we should put this in our. I think this is going to be also a recurring character. So why would we have this as. I don't remember where we put this. Social. Oh, we only have that. So maybe I didn't bring it over. But social dynamics or social, the positive effects would be somewhere up here. It would be something like this. I don't know, social relationships. But then also we would want to talk about that in terms of maybe motivation or. Yeah, I'm not sure. But that topic would also come up when we're talking about thinking. Where do we put that? Forms of thinking. Social discussion. Huge part of thinking. And feedback mechanisms in general, which would also be something like LLMs, etc. And then the behaviors of effective social encounters would be something like that would be like pursuing goals effectively. Social collaboration would be just something there. Empathy. Ooh. Effective behaviors. Empathy. Social norms. That's a bigger topic. Peer influence and cultural factors in decision making. Okay. Mentorship, accountability. Oh, that's nice. Mentorship, accountability. Miscellaneous sunlight, ice baths. That would be up here. Sunlight, ice baths. If they're relevant. Medication, PEDs, etc. The full process. Okay, so once we get to the full process, we're kind of chilling. So that's what we're here. Revisiting freedom as a process. Right, this is going to be something like reassessment. Journaling. Maybe journaling does come up when we talk about this stuff earlier on. No, journaling could be up here. Or down here. Putting it together. Practical strategies for goal achievement. Psychological pitfalls. Yeah, all these things are actually things that we'll want to bring to the other sections. Relationship with self and self-identity. Oh, this is something I do want to talk about in the end here. Something like relationship with self and self-identity. Social relationships, that I think we put elsewhere. Yeah. Relationships with the framework. Oh, yeah, we should do that actually. Relationship with the framework. With the framework itself. This is basically pointing out how try things out that you think would work, and then just see if they work, see how well they work, try to apply it in certain ways. You know, this isn't you must do all this stuff. This is a relationship. This is going to be a process. So, epilogue, uncategorized. We've got biological constraints. Okay, we got that in there. Digital tools, we'll put those where necessary. Cognitive enhancement. Yep. Body cognition. Yep. I think we're chilling. File, download, MD. Let's get it. All right, this is what I have for the outline draft. Still not filled out with everything that I had in the document, but I'm just trying to organize the larger sections to roughly organize. All right, and then we can play some Hades after this. It's a bummer that we have to do all this non-part 2 stuff on these other days, because part 2 is about to get pretty fun. It's gonna pick up, and I think that the goal is to not start picking up on part 2 until after we finish the read-throughs of part 1, which requires that I actually, you know, ensure that part 1 is sound and everything's written in a way that makes sense with the stuff that I still need to like look through and read. I mean, granted, part 1 I think is still pretty great right now, but we got to make it better. Got to make sure. This is an excellent set of notes and a great start. It's clear you've already identified all the crucial components. The key now is to arrange them into a narrative that flows logically, guiding the reader from foundational principles to practical application. Based on your mission for part 2 and the foundation you built in part 1, here is a suggested structure that organizes your existing topics into a more cohesive and compelling framework. Okay. Let's deal with this later. I will read that later. All right, I think I'm going to call it for this half of the stream. So I will start up on Hades in like 5 to 10 minutes, I would say. And I don't know if we'll be able to finish by 10, but I'll try. We'll try to do a quick run. A busted run, as per usual.